During a family dinner, my husband's sister whispered, "I saw the paternity test. He's not yours." I looked at my husband as he dropped his fork, stammering, "It was a mistake. I meant to tell you." I stood up, pulled a folder from my bag, and said, "Good. Because this DNA test says he's mine." "Who's lying now?" His sister's jaw dropped. There's a moment when you realize the people sitting around you at the dinner table aren't who you thought they were. For me, it happened somewhere between the mashed potatoes and the roasted chicken. My name's Laurel Jennings. I'm 36 years old, a third-grade teacher living in Savannah, Georgia. Most days are a blur of lesson plans, sticky-fingered hugs, and caffeine. I married Aaron Hayes 6 years ago. Met him at a friend's wedding, of all places, one of those messy nights full of cheap wine and bad dancing where you end up meeting someone who feels like they've always been part of your story. Aaron was easy, steady, the kind of guy who remembered to scrape the ice off my windshield in the winter without being asked, the kind of guy who kissed my forehead when he thought I was asleep. Or at least, that's who I thought he was. Our son, Caleb, was 3 years old, a dimpled, giggling ball of energy with Aaron's laugh and my stubborn chin. He was my whole world. Aaron's family? Not so much. The Hayes family was complicated, polite on the surface. But underneath, there was this constant hum of judgment. Like no matter how many birthday parties I threw or casseroles I baked, I'd never quite measure up. Especially to his sister, Caroline. Caroline was the kind of person who could turn, bless your heart, into a knife if you blinked. She was always around, at every dinner, every barbecue, every major life event. Watching, whispering, smiling with all her teeth and none of her warmth. So when Aaron said his parents wanted a family dinner to catch up, I agreed, even though my stomach twisted the second he said it. I told myself it would be fine. Caleb would be there. We'd talk about preschool, vacation plans, normal stuff. Maybe for once, it would just be easy. I should have known better. The dinner started normal enough. Aaron's mom gushed over the new gardenia bushes in the backyard. His dad complained about property taxes. Caroline picked at her food like it personally offended her. I bounced Caleb on my hip for a while before setting him up with a coloring book at the end of the table. We were halfway through the main course when Caroline leaned over. Close enough that I could smell her perfume, something sharp and expensive. She smiled sweetly and whispered, "I saw the paternity test. He's not yours." For a second, I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The room spun around me, soft clinks of forks on plates, Caleb humming quietly to himself, Aaron reaching for another roll like nothing had just shattered. I turned slowly to look at her. Her smile widened like she could already taste the destruction. I turned my gaze to Aaron, right as his fork clattered onto his plate. His face went gray. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "It was a mistake," he stammered. "I meant to tell you." The whole table froze. Every conversation died mid-sentence. Caleb looked up from his coloring, blinking. I stood up slowly, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might crack my ribs. I reached into my bag, the one I had set quietly by my chair hours ago, just in case. Pulled out a manila folder, set it down on the table with a soft thud, opened it, and pulled out the paper. The DNA test I had done myself 2 weeks ago when some quiet, persistent little voice in my gut told me I needed to. I held it up, nice and slow, high enough for everyone at that damn table to see. "Good," I said, my voice calm but ringing clear in the stunned silence. "Because this DNA test says he's mine." I stared right at Caroline. "Who's lying now?" Her jaw dropped. The blood drained from her face so fast she looked almost translucent. Aaron made a strangled sound, half cough, half sob. No one else said a word. You expect a lot of things at a family dinner. Small talk, forced smiles, maybe a few passive-aggressive comments about the gravy being too salty. What you don't expect. Your husband's sister leaning over your plate of roasted chicken and green beans to whisper a grenade right into your ear. "I saw the paternity test. He's not yours." For a second, I thought I misheard her. I stared down at my plate, my fork hovering over a pile of mashed potatoes. The hum of conversation around the table kept going, Aaron's mom talking about gardenias, his dad grumbling about the neighbor's dog. Completely normal. Like my world hadn't just tilted sideways. I turned my head slowly. Caroline sat there, smiling sweetly, picking at her food like she hadn't just tried to shatter my life with a single sentence. I blinked at her. She smiled wider. I looked at Aaron. Really looked. And that's when I saw it, the panic. The way his hand clenched tight around his fork. The way the color drained from his face. The way his eyes darted to me and then away, like he couldn't quite bear to meet them. He dropped his fork with a clatter that seemed deafening in the polite murmur of the dining room. Everyone turned to look. His mother frowned. Dennis, his father, set his drink down with a little too much force. Aaron opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed hard. It was a mistake, he said finally, his voice low and shaking. I meant to tell you. The room went dead silent. Even Caleb, sitting at the kids' table a few feet away, looked up from his crayon masterpiece. I pushed my chair back slowly. The legs scraped against the tile floor with an awful screech. I stood up, smoothing my skirt with shaking hands. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I reached down, picked up my purse from the floor beside my chair, and pulled out the folder I had tucked there before we even left the house. Just in case. Because some part of me, the part that had been sleeping restlessly for months, knew this family wouldn't let me leave tonight without trying to rip something from me. I set the folder on the table, opened it carefully, pulled out the crisp sheet of paper inside, held it up between two fingers, letting the fancy DNA Clinic logo at the top gleam under the dining room light. I didn't say a word. Just let the paper speak for itself. I held Aaron's gaze when I finally spoke. Good, I said calmly. Because this DNA test says he's mine. I turned my eyes slowly, deliberately, back to Caroline. Who's lying now? Caroline's face paled, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. She sputtered. You faked it, I laughed, a short, sharp sound that cracked through the heavy tension hanging over the table. Faked it. I repeated, raising an eyebrow. You think I faked a legally binding DNA test? Aaron shifted in his seat, his knuckles white against the table edge. I didn't. I mean, I wasn't sure. He muttered, trailing off like even he couldn't defend the garbage spilling out of his mouth. Joyce, his mother, cleared her throat sharply, her voice cutting through the thick silence. Maybe we should all just calm down, she said. I turned to her slowly. Calm down, I said, my voice soft. Your daughter accused me of lying about my own child. Your son sat here and let her. Joyce pressed her lips together into a thin, hard line, but said nothing. Of course she didn't. Silence was their favorite weapon. Dennis finally spoke up, his voice rough. Maybe this isn't the place, no, I said, still calm, still steady. This is exactly the place. I dropped the DNA test onto the table. The paper fluttered slightly, landing right in front of Aaron's untouched plate. You wanted a show? I said, glancing at Caroline. Congratulations. You got one. I picked up my purse, slinging it over my shoulder. Looked around the table at all of them, stunned, silent, ashamed. Or maybe just embarrassed they got caught. Either way, it didn't matter. They weren't my problem anymore. I bent down, scooping Caleb into my arms. He clung to my neck, confused, his crayon falling from his fingers. Are we going home, Mommy? He asked, his voice small. I kissed his forehead. Yeah, baby, I whispered. We're going home. Aaron stood up, finally. He reached for my arm. Laurel, wait, I pulled back, out of his reach. No, I said firmly. You had your chance. His mouth worked uselessly. He didn't even try to deny it. Didn't even try to fight for us. And that told me everything I needed to know. I didn't look back as I walked out of that house. Didn't look back at Caroline's stunned face or Joyce's pursed lips or Dennis's frown. Didn't even look back at Aaron. Because when people show you who they are, you don't argue. You don't explain. You don't beg. You leave. The night air hit me as soon as I stepped outside, cool and sharp against my skin. I hugged Caleb a little closer to my chest, breathing in the familiar, sweet smell of his hair. The world felt clearer out here. No tight smiles. No careful words. No invisible barbs hidden in compliments. Just me and my son and the quiet certainty that I was doing the right thing. Caleb yawned against my shoulder. I buckled him into his car seat with slow, steady hands, smoothing his curls back from his forehead. He blinked up at me sleepily. You mad, Mommy? He asked, his voice soft and uncertain. I leaned in and kissed his forehead again. No, baby, I whispered. Not mad, just ready for something better. He smiled, that sleepy, trusting smile only little kids have, and closed his eyes. I closed the door gently, standing there for a second, letting myself feel it. The end of something. The beginning of something else. My phone buzzed in my bag. I didn't even have to check to know it was Aaron. I slid into the driver's seat, started the engine, and pulled out of the driveway without glancing back at the house. Without glancing back at him. When I got home, I put Caleb to bed. Read him 3 stories instead of 1. Stayed curled up beside him until his breathing evened out and he fell into a deep, peaceful sleep. Then I sat on the living room floor, legs crossed under me, phone buzzing endlessly beside me. Calls. Texts. More voicemails than I could count. Aaron's name flashing over and over again on the screen like a warning light. I picked up the phone once. Listened to one voicemail. Aaron, voicemail Laurel, please. I panicked. I didn't know how to fix it. I love you. I love Caleb. Please, just talk to me. Let's figure this out. You're my family. Please. I set the phone down, face down, and didn't call him back. Because it was too late. The next morning, there were flowers on the porch. Not from Aaron. From Caroline. A pathetic little bouquet of grocery store carnations shoved into a plastic vase with a note taped to the side. Sorry if there was a misunderstanding. Family is messy. Let's talk. Caroline and I stared at it for a long minute. Then I picked up the whole thing, vase, flowers, note, and dropped it neatly into the trash can next to the driveway. I didn't need to open old wounds dressed up as apologies. I didn't need to give people chances they hadn't earned. I didn't need to explain why I deserved better. I spent the next few weeks setting my life back up the way I wanted it. Filed for separation. Got a good lawyer, a woman who shook my hand like she meant it and smiled like she had seen every dirty trick in the book. Changed the locks on the house. Started going to the park every Saturday morning with Caleb, just us and a picnic blanket and the sun rising higher over the trees. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't some big dramatic new chapter. It was slow. Steady. Hours. Aaron kept trying. Flowers. Emails. Even a letter once, written out by hand, pages and pages of, I'm sorry, and I love you, and I'll change. But love isn't enough when trust is broken. And sorry doesn't put the pieces back together when someone let you bleed because staying silent was easier. One evening, after Caleb had fallen asleep early, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the stars blink to life in the velvet sky. The phone buzzed again. Aaron. This time, I blocked the number. Simple. Final. No anger. No drama. Just peace. Spring edged into summer, and the days grew long and warm in Savannah. The azaleas bloomed early that year, little explosions of pink and white everywhere I turned. And somehow, life started to feel lighter too. Not overnight, not all at once, but little by little. I rearranged the house. Moved Caleb's bed to the sunniest corner of his room. Painted the kitchen a soft, cheerful yellow one weekend while he stayed with my parents. Packed away the wedding photos, the old anniversary cards, the Mr. and Mrs. mugs that used to sit on the kitchen counter. Not in anger. Just cleaning house. Making space for the life I was building now. For me. For Caleb. For the quiet kind of happiness that didn't ask me to shrink to fit someone else's expectations. One afternoon, after a morning spent at Forsyth Park chasing Caleb around the fountains, I stopped by the little local bookstore downtown. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. Just wandering. Breathing. Living. That's when I bumped into Julia, one of Aaron's cousins. We both froze for a second, awkward smiles flashing across our faces. Hey, Laurel, she said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Hey, I said, shifting Caleb on my hip. He giggled, reaching out for a brightly colored picture book from the shelf behind me. Julia glanced down at him, then back at me. Her smile softened. You look good, she said. I shrugged a little, feeling a small, real smile tug at my mouth. I feel good. She hesitated, chewing on her lip like she was debating something. Finally, she said, I heard about everything. I'm sorry. I didn't ask what she had heard. Didn't ask who was spinning what version of the truth. I just nodded. Thanks, I said simply. Because sometimes there isn't anything else to say. Later, sitting on the front steps of the house while Caleb colored chalk dinosaurs on the sidewalk, I thought about that conversation. About how easy it would have been to stay. To accept less. To tell myself it was normal, it was fine, it was good enough. But I didn't. And every slow, steady step away from that life was proof that I had finally learned to listen to the part of me that knew I deserved better. The next week, Aaron sent a final email. No begging. No promises. Just 2 sentences. Aaron, email I'm sorry for everything. I hope you and Caleb are happy. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I closed the laptop. And that was that. No fanfare. No drama. No messy goodbye. Just the soft, quiet ending to a story that should have ended long before it ever began to break me. Summer rolled on. Mornings started early, sunlight spilling across the hardwood floors, waking Caleb before I was even fully conscious. I'd pad barefoot into the kitchen, hair a mess, making pancakes while he chattered about dinosaurs and outer space and whether or not he could have a dog. We'd eat together at the tiny table by the window, syrup sticking to our fingers, cartoons murmuring quietly from the living room. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the life I once pictured when I thought about happily ever after. It was better. It was real. One evening, after Caleb went down early, I found myself sitting on the back porch, a glass of iced tea sweating in my hand. The crickets chirped lazily in the thick Georgia air. The porch light flickered once, twice. I closed my eyes and let it all wash over me, the heat, the hum of the night, the quiet peace that had taken up residence in my chest. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Aaron. Not at Caroline. Not even at myself. Because anger is heavy, and I had carried enough of that. This was light. This was freedom. My neighbor, Mrs. Palmer, shuffled out onto her own porch next door, watering a stubborn pot of geraniums. She caught sight of me and waved her hose in my direction. "Looking peaceful over there, Laurel," she called, grinning. I laughed softly. "Feels peaceful." "Good," she said, nodding. "You earned it." I sipped my tea, the corners of my mouth tipping up into a real smile. "Yeah, I did." Later that night, after Caleb woke up crying from a bad dream and I tucked him back into bed, smoothing his hair off his damp forehead, I sat there a while just watching him breathe, thinking about how close I came to losing myself. How easy it would have been to stay quiet, to pretend, to accept the scraps I was being handed and call it love. But I didn't. I chose harder. I chose leaving. I chose rebuilding. I chose him. And I chose me. The next morning was one of those soft, golden summer mornings that made everything feel easier. I brewed a pot of coffee and sat on the back porch, Caleb busy with his toys nearby, making up stories about dragons and knights. The light filtered through the trees, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel that tight knot of tension under my ribs. No dread. No walking on eggshells. Just me breathing. Existing. Free. A few hours later, I ran into Caroline. It wasn't planned. I had taken Caleb to the little downtown farmer's market for fresh peaches and local honey, and there she was, standing stiffly by the flower stall, flipping through bouquets like they'd personally offended her. She spotted me immediately. I saw the way her mouth tightened, the way she squared her shoulders like she was bracing for a hit that wasn't coming. I almost kept walking, almost pretended I didn't see her, but then she stepped right into my path. "Laurel," she said, her voice tight. I adjusted the bag on my shoulder, kept my face neutral. "Caroline." She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. I wanted to say sorry. I raised my eyebrows slightly. "Sorry for what?" I asked, my voice calm. She looked around quickly, like she wanted an escape route. "For everything," she said finally. "For what I said. What I did." I nodded once. "I know you don't owe me anything," she rushed on. "But for what it's worth, I was wrong." I watched her carefully. There was no smugness this time. No gleam of satisfaction. Just a tired woman realizing she'd burned a bridge she couldn't rebuild. I thought about it. About the months of cold shoulders and whispered digs. About the dinner that had changed everything. About the choice she made and the choice I made in return. "I hope you figure yourself out, Caroline," I said quietly. And then I stepped around her. Not cruel. Not cold. Just done. Because forgiveness doesn't always mean letting someone back in. Sometimes it just means putting down the weight and walking away lighter. Caleb tugged on my hand a few stalls down, waving a sticky peach at me. I laughed, wiping juice off his chin with the edge of my sleeve. That was where my energy belonged. That was where my future was. Not standing in the ruins of someone else's bad choices. After that day at the farmer's market, I didn't see Caroline again. And honestly, I didn't think about her much either. Or Aaron. Or any of them. They became what they were always meant to be. Background noise I had learned how to mute. Life kept moving forward. Not perfect. Not easy. But real. I took on more freelance projects, designing little logos and websites for local businesses. I started painting again, badly, messily, covering cheap canvases with colors that made no sense but made me feel alive. Caleb grew taller, chattier, funnier. He lost his first tooth in early September and insisted the tooth fairy would pay double if he left a picture too. He started preschool that fall, his tiny backpack almost bigger than he was. I cried the whole drive home after dropping him off. Not because I was sad, but because we had made it here. Whole. Happy. Free. One evening, about a year after that disastrous family dinner, I was sitting at my favorite little cafe downtown, sketching in my notebook and sipping an iced tea. A familiar voice floated over from the next table. "Aaron." I didn't even turn at first. I didn't have to. I knew that voice. He was talking to a friend, one of those low, weary conversations that carries just enough in the tone to make you curious if you listen close. "I thought she'd come back," he said. I thought she'd forgive me. The friend murmured something I couldn't catch. Erin let out a bitter little laugh. She didn't. She's doing better than ever. There was a pause. A long, heavy one. She doesn't even miss me, he said quietly. His friend said something again, something about you made your choices, and the conversation drifted away as they got up to leave. I kept my head down, pretending to be lost in my notebook. But inside, I was smiling. Not cruelly. Not vengefully. Just peacefully. Because that's the thing about choosing yourself. You don't have to yell about it. You don't have to prove anything. You just live. You laugh louder. You breathe easier. You love harder, starting with yourself. And the people who didn't see your worth? They get to live with the echo of what they lost. I finished my tea, closed my notebook, walked out into the golden savannah evening, the air warm and heavy with the smell of gardenias. No anger, no sadness, just a quiet, steady joy humming in my chest. The kind that only comes when you finally realize you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong people. And now? Now, I was asking myself. And I was saying yes.